is a great day. I've connected with a friend of mine that we both spoke at Harvard. Um, he does amazing things to test the body. And some of the questions we're going to ask him, you're not going to believe what he did. But I follow him through Facebook. I've watched him through his adventures and everything. It's one surprise after the other. But Oshke, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just briefly say Marine Corps veteran, author of Fearvana, speaker, and adventurer that, as you briefly hinted on, of course, we can dive deeper into it, that explores some of the most intense, hostile environments on the planet to push the body, mind, and spirit to their absolute edges. And I just returned from 60 days alone in Antarctica, where I literally pushed the body to the very brink of death.
Wow.
Well, let me ask you a question. What prompted you to start doing the extraordinary things you have done to test the limits of oneself?
What got me into this world of adventure sports and confronting my fears and pushing the limits was when I joined the Marines. I moved to the US at the age of 13 from India, Singapore, and very quickly after moving here, I got heavily into drugs, into alcohol, lost two friends to addiction, was very self-destructive. I still have scars on my arm from cutting myself, burning myself, and I saw the movie Black Hawk Down. Have you all seen that movie?
I've
Yes.
got friends in Black Hawk Down.
Amazing.
Real,
That
the
movie
real
touched my
guys.
soul and it changed my life. Watching these men, specifically Gary Gordon and Randy Sugar, the Medal of Honor recipients who died saving Michael Durant. I mean, the courage, the awe-inspiring compassion of that, it made me change my entire life. It changed the direct trajectory of my life. I stopped doing drugs overnight. It took me a while to join the Marines because I have flat feet, scoliosis, and a blood disorder that two doctors told me would kill me in boot camp. But this was post 9/11, and here's a young kid wanting to go Marine Corps infantry. They found a way for me. So I enlisted in the Marines, and that birthed in me everything I am today. It taught me the value of going to war with the self to see what you will find. Marine Corps training was hard. I suffered, not just for myself and attaining something greater within myself, but you suffer for something greater than you, right? In the Marines, you know this, Alan, in the military, you fight for the others. Your men and your mission are more important than you. And that's beautiful to live in that world. So that laid the foundation to then say, all right, I'm scared of all these things. I'm scared of heights. I'm scared of open spaces. I'm scared of water. Got it. Let me go face all those fears. So I went rock climbing, mountain climbing, cave diving, scuba diving, you name it. And that laid the foundation for now me taking it further and further and further over many decades.
And so you were kind of talking about some of the things that you've done, but what would be the major highlights, especially, I guess, the Antarctica experience?
I've run many, many ultra marathons. I did a 167-mile run across Liberia to raise funds to build a school, run for 24 hours. I've spent 17 days completely alone in a dark room, so dark you can't see your hand in front of you. I've climbed mountains in the Himalayas. I've done polar expeditions all over the world, probably dragged heavy sleds for over 1,200 miles, 100 days alone in the Arctic and Antarctica. Most recently, this 60-day expedition in Antarctica that was what many polar explorers call the boldest Antarctic expedition in modern times because it had never been attempted before, let alone completed. I was the first person on Earth to attempt what is essentially an impossible feat to cross Antarctica without dogs or kites. 4 years ago on a training expedition in Antarctica, I lost two fingers to frostbite, as you can see, and so played on some very extreme edges. But this most recent one was a culmination. I dragged a 420-pound sled uphill through some of the worst snow conditions in Antarctic history for 500 miles before I literally pushed the body to the very edge of death after 60 days alone out there.
Well, why did you pick crossing Antarctica?
So, having done almost every outdoor sport you could think of, I've been very blessed to have, climbed mountains, scuba diving, cross-country skiing, you name it. Polar exploration, polar travel, it's not as dangerous as, let's say, climbing up a mountain, but it is far more suffering. I've done big mountains. Like, for example, when I was on Denali in Alaska a couple of years ago, it's the tallest mountain in North America. You're on a ridge line at 16,000 feet. There's a thin ridge with a 1,000-foot drop on each side of you. So when you're doing that, it's dangerous. You can actually fall off the mountain. Somebody did fall off the mountain when I was there. And but because of that, because of the danger, your mind is not wandering. It's right there in front of you on the one step in front of you. Even as you go up and down a mountain, it's more dynamic. The views are different. The terrain is different. And every day is different. In polar travel, every day is the exact same. For the first 30 days in Antarctica, all I saw was blank white nothingness. My first glimpse of a mountain was on day 31. But for the first 30 days, there was not a single other sight than blank white nothingness, and it's flat. So the mind wanders, and that's the most mentally draining element of it, is skiing into flat white nothingness day after day after day after day, doing the exact same thing. So while it's not as dangerous, it is mentally and physically the hardest thing that I've ever done, and that's what drew me to it. Not because of the suffering in and of itself, but what that suffering gives you access to. You in like in life, right? You have to battle the dragon to find the treasure. So the bigger the dragon, the greater the treasure and the more epic the story. So I wanted to find the biggest dragon I could possibly find and battle that dragon to unearth the treasures of the spirit.
How
Well,
did you
you
train?
probably found that.
Yeah, he did. So how did you train and prepare for this?
I spent 4 years directly training. I was on expeditions all over, did an expedition in Antarctica, expedition in Arctic. Physical training involved dragging tires. I live in Arizona, so sometimes in temperatures as high as 125 degrees in the summer of Arizona, dragging tires around local parks. I spent 10 days in that dark room to master my relationship with myself, to train in solitude. I spent months refining a nutritional plan, every piece of gear, because I was carrying all my own weight in two sleds that initially weighed 420 pounds. Every piece of gear had to be vetted and tested. I literally cut my toothbrush in half to save 5 grams. So wherever I could save weight, every piece of gear to test and to save weight. And I had to, and on top of all this, we had to raise $1.1 million from scratch to fund this expedition because it was such a bold expedition to do logistics in a place like Antarctica for that long a period of time. There was never a logistical plan put together in place for an expedition of this magnitude. So we had to train physically, mentally with gear, preparation, study maps, and raise $1.1 million. In all honesty, the 4 years leading up to Antarctica was in some ways harder than Antarctica itself. It was brutal.
Well, I remember um, watching you going up the side of mountains, pulling those tractor tires. And I'd show my wife. She says, "Who's that crazy guy?"
I get that a lot, my friend. As you can imagine, especially when people see me dragging tires around parks, people are like, "What are you doing?" I get stopped a lot.
You made it about 500 miles, right?
500 miles. Yep. Going uphill through, we ended up getting some of the worst snow conditions in modern Antarctic history. There were four other adventurers out there attempting different kinds of records. Everybody failed. The snow conditions were so brutal. There were days out there where I would be dragging these two sleds. They would get stuck in the snow. I would have to fight that out with all my might. 3 steps later, they would get stuck again. And this would go on and on for 9 to 10 hours a day. It was unforgiving. It was unforgiving.
Did you? Rec-
One question I got for you. Did you have any music or any motivational speaking that you took along with
That I
you?
listened. So I would say I spend about 40% of the time listening to nothing. Part of the draw is the silence, to be still with yourself. Paradoxically, in moments of absolute solitude, I've had brief glimpses of greater connection to all that is than you can possibly imagine. I mean, whatever your version of God may be, but connection to the universe, to God, to soul, to myself, to earth, to even my wife back home, and brief glimpses of this because out there, the volume of life is dialed. So some of the most blissful connected moments, but also some of the hardest moments I've ever endured. So part of the draw was the silence. So I spent about 40% of the time, I would say, in silence, maybe 40% in music, and about 20% in audiobooks, I would say.
All right. You showed me some injuries. How many injuries did you receive from Antarctica?
So the Frostbitten Fingers was my first expedition in Antarctica 4 years ago. During the training phases, I've gotten heat exhaustion, I've gotten hypothermia during the training. And actually, what happened in this version in this expedition, what I just got back from, after 60 days, I had very severe pain in my gut that I found out later was diverticulitis, which briefly to summarize is infection in the colon. And if you don't get it treated, if you don't get rest and you don't get medication, it can burst. And when it bursts, it goes into the bloodstream, gets septic, it leads to what's called peritonitis, and that kills you. So 8 years ago, that's exactly what happened to an adventurer, a British adventurer, very tragically died from peritonitis because this guy was a savage, Henry Worsley. He pushed and he died. So I ended up getting sort of phase one of that. And had I not stopped at that point to get rest, I was on a dose of antibiotics and stop, it would have been fatal. So I got diverticulitis in the end. We're still just actually this morning I went and got a blood test because the body's still not fully recovered. I did a blood test a month and a half ago, and there was a lot wrong internally. So I now physically feel fine, but internally there's still a lot of issues because I put the body through pretty absurd amounts of stress. And so I just got another blood test to hopefully see where we're at, and hopefully things are better now.
Well, what was the most important lesson that you learned from your Antarctica trip?
Great question. It's something that I have come to crystallize and term what I call the paradox of oneness. And what this idea is, it's the realization that the entire human experience is this dance of opposites. So there's life and death, light and dark, pain and pleasure, masculine and feminine, ego and humility, so on and so forth. The entire human experience is filled with these opposites. Now, very often we demonize one side as bad. So even, for example, that's why I wrote my book Fearvana. This was kind of culmination of that and taking it to a next level. Fear and nirvana. It's this idea that fear and nirvana, two seemingly contradictory concepts, are actually complementary. And fear is not the antithesis of nirvana. Fear is an access point to nirvana. So I wrote this book 5 years ago, but in Antarctica, it got crystallized even more to what I call now the paradox of oneness, which is the realization that this human experience that is a dance of opposites, it's not about resisting or clinging to either side. They are not, in fact, opposites. They are two expressions of the same whole. They are not separate. You cannot have a summit without a valley. You cannot have light without dark. And so the goal of this, the realization is to stop resisting or clinging to either side of any duality and to accept each as two expressions of the same whole. And when you do that, you attain not only greater peace, but greater spiritual mastery, greater fulfillment, greater mastery in whatever you're chasing in terms of tangible, actionable goals, because all unnecessary suffering is the result of resisting or clinging to one side. It's resistance of isness. So for example, in Antarctica, as I mentioned, I was completely alone, but yet I would feel more connected than all that is. I had moments where I'm looking out at the Antarctic landscape and you feel so small. You are this one very small part of this grand landscape, but yet paradoxically in that same moment, you feel all powerful because I was geographically the most isolated human being on Earth in the most hostile environment on Earth. To even set foot in that land, you feel all powerful and all humble at the same time. So you get to experience what I would call moments of enlightenment where two opposing forces can coexist as one.
So, Alan, again, how it's so amazing where Alan finds these amazing guests. I went and Googled you just now, and I went to your Wikipedia, and you have been endorsed by the Dalai Lama and Jack Canfield.
Mhm.
I mean, your story is just unreal. What's new with you? With you? You're an entrepreneur as well. So
Yes,
when
sir.
you're not, tackling Antarctica, what are you doing?
So for the last year and a half, directly training for Antarctica, but now that I'm back, as you mentioned, I am an entrepreneur. I'm a speaker, so I travel around speaking, sharing the lessons from these edges to help others navigate their own suffering. I'm writing my next book, actually two books. One I'm co-authoring with my wife on how to help high performers build a thriving relationship without sacrificing ambition. And then I'm writing another book called Step into the Storm about how to keep doing the hard things that matter to get the results you want. And we also have digital training programs that we're building, and the whole goal is building this large and this brand around this brand Fearvana, this ecosystem of products and services to help people do two things ultimately: wage war on their limits and build peace and love.
Well, I'll tell you what, this has been a heck of a interview. It's probably my favorite.
Oh,
And I was going to ask you, on the overall experiences, what can you what can you teach me as an old, just an ordinary guy? But from what you're just telling us through all the stuff that you're doing, uh, I mean, I'm looking forward to any speaking events you go to or any of these programs you come out with.
thank you. Yeah, the goal ultimately is to help people. I'm actually speaking at an event in 2 weeks to a group of very successful 8, 9 figure entrepreneurs. And to your point, Alan, to your question about what can teach that, many people are far more successful than me in many other areas. I think where my mastery is around the inner mastery and encouraging people, like the greatest hero's journey is the one within. It's not the only journey. There's many journeys, especially as both of us, we're clearly driving, all three of us here, we're all driving for greatness and in our respective crafts. But the hero's journey within is the one that will guide you on every other journey. And in that journey within, inviting people to take time for stillness, to free their mind beyond the constructs and prisons of our own mind. Because all three of us, Alan, you, Neil, you, me, all of us, we don't know what we don't know. So we're all swimming in our own fishbowl of our mind. And what I help people do, what I speak about is going beyond that fishbowl to free our mind into constructs that expand us, and not just iterative growth, but exponential growth, that quantum leaps into brand new versions of ourselves that an old version can't even fathom. And the way to do that is through one, setting impossible goals, taking time for stillness and surrender, being in places where you're no longer imprisoned by thought, which is ultimately conceptual, but you're freeing your mind to the vast expanse, the limitlessness of pure experience, which is ultimately eternal. And when you do that, you expand the consciousness of your soul, and you expand the results you can create, whether it be financial results or in your relationship or the practical results in our life as well. And helping people do that, because it's just not only more exciting, but it's also a more fun way to live, and you create better results. It's a win-win-win.
Best place we can find info on you. Where can we go?
Fearvana, at Fearvana on Instagram, Fearvana. The book is on Amazon, paperback, Kindle, Audible, and the website Fearvana as well.
All right. And go to strategicwealthstrategies.com. Check out Alan Porter, and you can contact you, Alan. Best places?
910-551-1046. My Gmail is strategicwealth, the number 0 at gmail.com. And you can always go on my website, strategicwealthstrategies.com. I have many, many videos. I've got a YouTube channel with over 500 videos, a lot of education in there.
Oh,
I really appreciate you being on here today with us. And I've become educated again.
All right.
Thank you,
That
Bob.
was the Strategic Wealth Strategies podcast.